Welcome, dear listener. You're about to hear a calm and gentle story, a forgotten piece of history, told in a way meant to help you rest, unwind, and drift peacefully into sleep. Tonight's tale is called The King Who Slept Through His Own War. It's a story from a quieter age, about a king who ruled not through power or might, but through peace and stillness, a man whose rest saved an entire kingdom. So settle in, dim the lights, close your eyes, and let the soft rhythm of words carry you away. In the hush of early dawn, when the mist still wrapped the hills of Ilaria like a mother's shawl, the kingdom rested under a silence so complete that even the birds seemed reluctant to disturb it. From the eastern towers of Hallandskeep Castle, the bells chimed softly, not to announce alarm, nor to call to prayer, but simply to mark the gentle passage of time, as they had done for hundreds of years. The people of Ilaria had always prized stillness. They were farmers and scribes, quiet keepers of their routines, who took comfort in the hum of the mill, the murmur of streams, and the rhythm of their own steady lives. And presiding over all of it, not fiercely, not boldly, but peacefully, was my King Alden the Mild, known among his people as the Resting King. Alden had not sought his crown. It had found him in the way that quiet responsibilities do, passed down, one weary hand to another. When his father, King Halric, had died after decades of cautious rule, Alden had accepted the golden circlet with a bow of the head and the faintest of sighs. He was young then, though not ambitious. His eyes were not the sharp eyes of a conqueror, but soft and watchful, like someone perpetually half in thought, half in dream. He ruled from a chamber lined with books, not banners. His councilmen often found him seated by the tall arched window, gazing at the slow-moving clouds, fingers loosely holding a quill above parchment, on which no words had yet been written, and yet under his rule the kingdom did not falter. Taxes were fair, harvest plentiful, and peace. That rare and fickle guest had lingered longer than anyone could remember. But peace, as the old monks of Hallandskeep often said, is like the surface of a pond, still only until a stone is thrown. The stone came from the north. It began, as so many troubles do, with a letter. The messenger arrived at dusk, his horse pale with foam, his cloak torn by branches of the border forest. He was admitted to the great hall, where Alden sat not upon his throne, but beside it a simple cup of warm milk in his hand. "Sire," the messenger said, bowing so low that his voice almost reached the stone floor, "Lord Revic of Norfell has declared himself your equal. He gathers men. He calls himself King of the True North." There was silence, the kind of silence that stretched and hummed like the air before thunder. Then Alden blinked, slow and deliberate. "I see," he said quietly. "And the weather? Was it kind on your journey?" The messenger hesitated, uncertain. "Sire, the weather?" "Yes," said the king, his tone warm, absent-minded. "I am told the winds in Norfell can be cruel this time of year." The council exchanged looks. The chancellor, old and sharp as a quill himself, leaned forward. "Your Majesty, this is an act of rebellion. We must summon the banners, fortify the bridges, send word to—" But Alden raised a gentle hand, as one might to still a child. "Let us not hurry," he said. Wars have a way of waking too soon. Let this one sleep a while longer. And so he did not act. In the weeks that followed, reports continued to drift in, like leaves on a slow current. Norfol's men trained in the forests. Their blacksmiths burned through the nights. The court grew restless. The queen, Lady Alara, whose spirit was like sunlight through glass, bright, uncontainable, urged him to respond. "My lord," she said one evening, "you cannot sleep through this. You must rise and defend what is ours." Alden looked at her with affection. "What is ours, my heart?" "The soil, the stones, the names on maps drawn by men long gone." She frowned, tears glimmering. "Our people. They believe in you." "And belief," he murmured, "is the gentlest kind of chain." He smiled then, not mockingly but sadly, and Karenin set his hand upon hers. "We will see, my dear. We will see." That night, while his advisors argued deep into the hours before dawn, King Alden retired to his chamber. He lay upon his bed of linen and cedar, the moonlight soft across his face, and he slept. He slept as the wind turned colder. He slept as the watchmen lit more torches along the walls. He slept as the first smoke from Norfel's forges curled into the northern sky. By morning the court was frantic. But in Ilaria, life continued, and at least for a time, as it always had. The bakers rose with the dawn, the shepherds called their flocks, and the rivers sang their same low songs. Word of the northern lord's defiance trickled through taverns and markets. But the people, seeing their king calm and unshaken, took comfort in his composure. "If his majesty does not worry," they said, "why should we?" It was a strange sort of magic. The peace that Alden inspired, not through power, nor command, but through the depth of his stillness. Yet even peace built on calm can tremble when the ground shifts beneath it. Because far to the north, Lord Revic of Norfel did not sleep. He sharpened swords, he summoned riders, and as the snows of late autumn began to fall, his armies began their quiet march south. Snow fell early that year in Ilaria. It began as a dusting on the hills, soft and white as sifted flour, then deepened into drifts that muffled the sound of hooves and footsteps alike. The world grew quiet, as though the land itself held its breath. From the watchtowers along the northern road, sentries saw the first signs of movement. Thin trails of smoke, distant lights, the faint shimmer of iron beneath gray skies. The army of Norfel was on the move, but within the walls of Halendskeep Castle, the hearth still burned gently, the kitchen still hummed, and the court still waited for their king to rise. Each morning the council gathered. In the round hall, a chamber of oak and amber light, where banners of past victories hung like faded memories. Lord Chancellor Orwin unrolled fresh maps daily, his hands trembling slightly as he pressed pins and markers into them. "The enemy approaches the river Hain," he said on one such morning. "If they cross it, they will be within a week's ride of our gates. Then we must stop them at the river," said Captain Mareth, his voice echoing in the high rafters. "We have men enough to hold the bridge." All eyes turned toward the dais at the head of the hall. There sat the throne of Ilaria, empty. The queen entered quietly, her gown trailing silver thread that shimmered like frost. "His Majesty will not attend today?" she said softly. Orwin sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Will not or cannot, my lady." Alara met his gaze, calm but weary. "He is at rest." The physicians say he sleeps well. Too well, Marith muttered under his breath. While the realm stirs with fear, the queen did not rebuke him. She simply looked to the window, where snowflakes drifted like falling feathers. Do what must be done, she said. He trusts you all. And so, under the quiet blessing of a sleeping king, the council acted. Messengers rode south to muster the border guards. Blacksmiths worked by candlelight, shaping swords that gleamed cold as winter dawn. Farmers turned their plow horses to the service of war. Yet even as Ilaria prepared, there was no fanfare, no rallying cries, only the steady rhythm of men and women doing what they must, in silence. Meanwhile, deep within his chamber, King Alden dreamed. He dreamed of the sea, though he had never seen it. He dreamed of endless waves rolling toward a shore that shimmered like polished glass. And on that shore stood two figures. One was himself, younger, unburdened, and the other was his father, King Halric, his crown gleaming faintly in the light of a setting sun. "Why do they march against me?" Alden asked. His father smiled as though he had asked a child's question. "Because you sit upon what they desire." "And what is that?" "The quiet," said Halric. "Peace is a treasure, and treasures make men restless." Alden turned to watch the waves. They came and went endlessly, unhurried. "What should I do?" he asked. "Listen," said his father, fading into the horizon. "Sleep while you can. Wake when you must." Beyond the dreaming king, the war moved closer. At the river Hain, Captain Marith stood in the snow beside his men. The bridge was narrow, old stone worn smooth by years of trade and travel. On the far side, the army of Norfil gathered, a gray mass of cloaks and armor that seemed to blend with the mist. "Hold," Marith said quietly. When the first arrow flew, it sang softly like the note of a harp string. Then the air was filled with sound. The battle was brief and bitter. The men of Ilaria fought well, but the tide of Norfil was strong, its current relentless. When at last the bridge fell, Marith sent one rider south, a boy no older than 16, with orders to reach the castle and tell the queen what had passed. The boy rode through the night, the snow whipping at his face, until at dawn he reached the gates of Hallandskeep, half frozen and breathless. "The river!" he gasped. "The bridge is lost." In the great hall, silence fell once more. The queen looked toward the corridor that led to the royal chambers. "He must be told," she said. But when they entered, they found Alden as he always was, asleep, his hand resting lightly upon a closed book. A candle burned low beside him. "My lord," Alara whispered, kneeling beside the bed. "The war has come." His eyes did not open, but his lips moved faintly, and those near enough to hear caught a single murmur. Then let it pass through like a storm. Days turned into weeks. Snow turned to ice. The banners of Norfel drew closer to the city walls. Yet still Hallandskeep stood unbroken. It was not because of strength, but because of stillness. The enemy, finding no retaliation, no resistance beyond empty roads and shuttered villages, grew uneasy. Their scouts returned with strange tales, that the fields of Ilaria were deserted, that the people hid not in fear but in quiet faith. They whispered that their king was not mortal at all, but a spirit who ruled from dreams, untouched by the noise of war. Lord Revik scoffed at the stories, but unease settled among his men. The fires in their camps burned lower, Their laughter died. Some claimed to hear bells at night, soft and distant though no church stood near. By the time spring's first thaw began, the armies of Norfell were weary, their supplies thin. Revik's captains urged retreat, but pride held him fast. Until one morning, he rode to the crest of a hill overlooking the plain below Hallandskeep, and what he saw made him pause. There, beneath the pale light of dawn, the city lay utterly still. No guards lined the walls, no smoke rose from the hearths, no sound broke the air. It was as if the kingdom itself slept. "Are they gone?" one captain whispered. Revik said nothing. He dismounted, listening. There was nothing, no cry, no horn, no wind. Only the faint tolling of a bell from somewhere deep within the keep. He shuddered. "Perhaps," he said softly, "this is not a war to be won, but a dream we should leave." And so quietly as they had come, the armies of Norfell turned north once more. When the sentries on Alaria's walls awoke the next morning, the fields were empty. The snow had melted. The war, it seemed, had passed them by, like a distant storm that had changed its course. And in his chamber, King Alden stirred at last. He opened his eyes to sunlight streaming through the window, warm and golden. "Has it ended?" he asked softly. The queen nodded, tears bright in her eyes. "They have gone," Alden smiled faintly. "Then the world has learned," he murmured, "that even sleep may be stronger than the sword." He closed his eyes again, not in weariness but in peace, and the kingdom of Alaria, faithful in its stillness, awoke to a new spring. When the snows melted and the fields of Alaria began to green again, the people spoke of what had passed not as a war but as a shadow. They said the shadow had come down from the north, lingered for a time upon the hills, and vanished like mist at sunrise. No banners were torn, no trumpet sounded, no blood was spilled upon the soil. Only a quiet unease had swept through the land and then departed. In the taverns, the farmers whispered that perhaps the king had driven the invaders away with dreams instead of swords. Children, chasing each other in the spring fields, played at being soldiers who slept standing up, because that, they said, was how the resting king guarded them. The bards took up the tale as bards always do, adding notes of wonder and reverence until it became a legend in its own right. They sang in the marketplaces. He closed his eyes and the war grew still. For silence is stronger than any will. The king who dreamed while kingdoms bled, woke to find his foes had fled. Inside the castle, King Alden moved more slowly than before. He walked the corridors as though listening to some distant melody that only he could hear. His counselors greeted him with a reverence mixed with fear. None dared question the long sleep, nor how it had brought about such strange salvation. The Chancellor Orwin came to him one morning with a report of the kingdom's state. "Our granaries are full, Your Majesty. The people have returned to their work. The merchants from the south will resume trade by midsummer." Alden nodded absently, his eyes drifting toward the open window. Outside, the fields shimmered with young wheat, bending in the breeze like waves on a golden sea. "You have done well, Chancellor," he said softly. "All of you have done well." Orwin hesitated. "Sire, if I may speak freely." "You always may." "The people believe you?" "Performed a miracle. That your rest was a spell of protection. Some even say the gods favor you above all men." Alden smiled faintly. "Men need their stories, Orwin. Let them dream." It keeps the world gentle. But do you believe it, sire? The king looked at the horizon, where clouds drifted like the sails of distant ships. I believe, he said slowly, that sleep is a kind of faith. When we close our eyes, we surrender to the world and trust it will still be there when we wake. Orwin bowed his head, uncertain whether he had heard wisdom or poetry or both. The months turned softly. The kingdom settled back into its rhythm of peace. In the evenings, Alden would walk through the castle gardens with Queen Alara. She gathered herbs for the healers. He watched the sunset fade across the hills. Once, as the light dimmed to gold, Alara said, "Do you think it will last? This peace?" Alden paused. "Peace never lasts," he said gently, "but it returns again and again like spring. That is enough." He took her hand. It was warm, and she smiled at the simplicity of his words. Far away in Norfell, Lord Rivik brooded in his stone keep. His men had returned weary and ashamed, though none could explain what they had feared. Some swore that the very land of Ilaria had whispered to them to turn back. When Revik demanded proof of victory, none could give it. When he demanded to know who had fought them, none could answer. He sat long into the night, staring into the flames, wondering if he had faced a mortal kingdom at all, or something older and quieter than war itself. In time, Alden's story spread beyond the borders of Ilaria. Travelers carried it south across the narrow sea, to courts where kings scoffed by day and pondered by candlelight. In monasteries, monks wrote of the sleeping king as a sign of divine favor, and in songs sung by sailors the tale grew into prophecy. When men grow restless and hearts grow cold, the sleeping king shall rise once more, to teach the world that peace is old, and dreams outlast the sound of war. Years passed. Alden aged softly, as if time itself hesitated to trouble him. His beard turned silver, his eyes deeper but no less calm. He ruled not by decree but by example, the example of stillness. One night during the harvest festival, he stood on the balcony overlooking the square. The torches flickered below. Music drifted upward in warm waves. The laughter of his people filled the air like bells. Alara leaned beside him. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. He turned to her, puzzled. "Regret what?" "That you did not fight. That you let others think you were sleeping while danger crept so near." Alden thought for a long moment. Then he said, "Every man fights in his own way. Some with swords, some with words. I fought with silence." He smiled faintly. "And silence, my love, was enough." As the years rolled gently onward, and the kingdom of Ilaria continued to prosper, people came to believe that their peace was something sacred, a covenant between king and country, sealed not by battle but by rest. Children grew up never hearing the clash of arms, only the hum of wind across the plains. The old storytellers called those decades the quiet reign. And though age bent his back and slowed his step, King Alden remained steady, his heart as tranquil as ever. Sometimes when the moon was full and pale upon the fields, he would look north and whisper to himself, "Let them dream in their own lands now. We have dreamed long enough for all." That night in the gentle dark, as the castle lamps were dimmed one by one, the king of Ilaria lay once more upon his bed of linen and cedar. The scent of lavender drifted through the chamber. Outside, the river murmured softly as though reciting a prayer. And somewhere between waking and dream, Alden heard again the voice of his father. Sleep while you can. Wake when you must. He smiled. The kingdom dreamed on with him. The years drifted through Ilaria like soft clouds over calm water. There were no storms, no battles, only the slow rhythm of seasons, planting, harvest, rest, repeating with the patience of eternity. Children born in the year of the war had now grown, and their own children played in the meadows, never having seen a sword drawn in anger. Peace had become so natural that it no longer seemed like a gift, but like air and invisible, effortless and taken for granted. Yet time, as even kings learn, moves in quiet certainty. In his 73rd year, King Alden the Mild rose one morning and found the world slightly dimmer. It was not his eyes, though age had softened them, but something in the air itself. The songs of the birds seemed slower, the color of the sky more faded. He knew, in the way a man knows the end of a long dream, that his time was drawing near. The court noticed it too. He walked with care now, leaning on a slender cane of ash wood carved with vines, but his smile had not dimmed, nor had his calm. In the great hall, where once he had sat through restless debates of war and council, he now sat quietly among the children of his servants, telling them stories of the old world. He told them of the cities of glass in the south, where bells rang from towers shaped like flowers, of the mountain monks who carved their prayers into the stone faces of cliffs, of the nights when the sky was so clear that one could see the pale lights of forgotten stars. The children listened wide-eyed, and when one asked, "Were you ever afraid, Your Majesty?" he only smiled and said, "Of what use is fear to a man who must one day sleep?" That winter a faint illness came upon him. It was not sudden nor cruel, merely a soft dimming, as though the candle of his spirit burned lower with each passing night. The physicians brought him teas of wild thyme and honey. The queen stayed by his side, her hair now streaked with silver. On the 12th night of frost, when the moon hung full and cold above the silent kingdom, Alden asked for the windows to be opened. The servants hesitated. "Sire, the air is bitter." But he only said, "Let it in. The world is not as cold as men believe." So they opened the tall arched windows, and moonlight spilled across the chamber floor, pale as milk. The breeze carried the scent of snow and pine. The queen sat beside him. "Does it pain you?" she whispered. "No," he said softly. "It feels familiar." He looked toward the north, where the hills of Norfell lay beyond sight. "Do you remember," he asked, "the winter of the war?" "How could I forget?" she murmured. "I sometimes wonder," he said, "if the world only dreamed it. I slept, and yet I remember the sound of bells and snow. Perhaps that was all the war ever was, a dream too loud to ignore." Alara took his hand, feeling the faint warmth of his skin. "Then dream again," she said gently. "Let the world keep its peace a little longer." As the night deepened, the castle fell silent. The guards moved softly along the corridors. The candles burned to stubs. Alden lay still, breathing slow, his eyes half closed. He spoke one last time, his voice a whisper like the rustle of leaves. "Tell them," he said, "to keep watch over the quiet. It is more fragile than any crown." Then he sighed, not in pain, but in peace. and his breath left him as lightly as morning mist leaves the meadow. The news spread with the dawn. Bells tolled through the valleys, not in mourning, but in reverence. People came from every corner of Ilaria to stand before the castle gates. They brought no banners, no garlands, no gold, only silence. The fields themselves seemed to bow beneath the winter sun. Queen Ilara stood before them, calm and radiant, and spoke only once. "He sleeps still. Let us not wake him." And so they didn't. They laid him to rest in the Hall of Stone Kings, where his ancestors slept beneath carved effigies and candlelight. But unlike the others whose faces were stern and noble, Alden's effigy was sculpted with eyes closed, a faint smile upon his lips, as if he merely dreamed on. In the years that followed, the legend of the sleeping king grew. They said that when peace faltered and men again turned to war, the sound of bells would ring across the hills, and the king would rise once more, and not to fight, but to remind them of silence. Monks kept candles burning in his chamber. Travelers swore that on certain nights, when the moon was thin and silver, they saw a figure upon the northern walls of Helen's keep, robed in white, looking toward the horizon. And though the world beyond Ilaria changed, and empires rose and fell, the story endured. For generations, mothers told their children, "Sleep in peace, my child. The king still dreams." As centuries passed, the kingdom itself became part of the story. Maps forgot its borders. Historians debated if Ilaria had ever truly existed. But the legend lived on, not in books or banners, but in hearts that longed for quiet. And somewhere beyond time's reach, perhaps in the soft places where dreams and memory meet, a king still rests serene, untroubled as the world drifts on. He is not forgotten. He is not gone. He sleeps, and through that sleep, the world remembers peace.